Day one of Phoenix Suns training camp is in the books. And on today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll hear from Locked On Blazers host Mike Richman about Jusuf Nurkic and Nassir Little's game. But first, let's talk about Bradley Beal, who we heard from today at practice and why he cannot be quantified. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Suns your first listen on this Wednesday. The Suns just finished up their two-a-day training camp day one on Tuesday. I'm recording at 6:45. They may well be at that Verizon practice facility still working out. Would not be surprised, but if you are here for the first time, hit follow, hit subscribe. We're free and available everywhere. Just hit that button, get this show in your feed Monday through Friday from now through the rest of the season. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Suns right along with me each and every day. Let's go. Good conversation with Mike Richman of Locked On Blazers in segments 2 and 3 today, giving his thoughts on Nurkic and Little. Having covered those guys for a while, we do a little bit of who won the trade, who got better, who got worse stuff at the very end. We recorded this last week if it feels a little bit out of date, but I do think his perspective on the players is very good. Nevertheless, let's start with Bradley Beal. He spoke with media today at the practice facility after the first round of practicing, and I was able to make it out there, and what I want to share is why he cannot be quantified, as I said at the very top of the show, and I mean something very specific by that. There are a lot of analytics and basic stats that paint a very up and down, hard to decipher picture of Beal's recent years in Washington. Right? There was years where he shot well from three, years where he did not shoot well from three, years where his scoring was way up, years where his scoring was way down. Obviously, the games played has not been great lately. This past year, he attacked the basket a lot more, but also his mobility and motion and athleticism seemed like it was waning. Very hard to read. And so, off the top, that's why he's hard and impossible to quantify. But talking with him today at practice, and first, I just think fans should be ready. It seems like this guy is going to be a breath of fresh air, very, very genuine and thoughtful and insightful and just a smart guy who I think actually cares about more than just showing up, at work every day. And I think as an underrated or just overlooked, probably is a better way to put it, right? Being on a media, like the best the Washington Wizards ever were with Bradley Beal was mediocre to good, right? They've had good seasons. They've had good postseasons. But a lot of the time, on the whole, you would probably just average it out to say that they were pretty mediocre. And I think he cares about that. There was a joke from a media member who asked like a very deep question of like, you get another lease on your basketball life or something. Media members love to ask like the most flowery, poetic questions. And Beal was like, "Oh, did I die? Did my career die?" But I think the fact that he's even able and willing to engage with that stuff matters. And so when we're getting back to the impossible to quantify part of this, he was very distinctive about trying to make it clear that he was moving on from the Washington era of his life and really to separate himself from, I think, the uncertainty and questions about him from the past 3 seasons specifically. I think that he sees this as just a complete 180 on his career. He is able to play basketball, be a teammate, be a leader, be as I was saying, member of an icon for a fan base, all that stuff in a way that he just wasn't comfortable, wasn't able to do because of what the Wizards were the past few years. I asked him a question about if he felt like he could learn anything from that the past 3 seasons, and 2 in particular, and he didn't even really engage with my question, which I totally respect, but he's making that point clear. The reason I make the connection between that and him being impossible to quantify is that the case for Bradley Beal to be great for this team this season, and the reason I've talked so much about him on the podcast already, is that the case is for him to be a version of himself, right? And he talked about that today too in terms of being aggressive. He said that at practice today, the guys were actually being too passive. And he thinks that despite everybody wanting to talk about adjustments and sacrifice, that he thinks a big part of what will make him great on this team is to stay aggressive. And I tend to agree. Yeah, there might not be, he took 23 field goal attempts per game in his All-NBA season 3 years ago when he scored 31 a game. His usage rate that season was 34%. Is he going to be at that number in either of those categories this season? No. But that doesn't mean his approach to the game and even on the offensive end can't be pretty similar. Now, I think that he does need to take more threes. I think he will take more threes. Obviously, there will be a ball handling component. Obviously, there will be, maybe a little more off ball than he had last year, for instance. But still, he's always been a comfortable and effective off ball scorer too. And so I just think, considering the evolution that he will need to take, the fact that this is the best team he's ever played for, and then on the defensive end, the fact that he just straight up didn't have a lot to defend for the past few years. And I know that's an easy excuse. I know that's a lazy excuse. And I'm not here to tell you that I know how Bradley Beal is going to perform on the defensive end of the floor this season. I'm not. I can't tell you that. But he said it's a big expectation we have on ourselves to defend this year. We know that we can score, but we want to be an elite defensive team and showcase that we can do that. And he kind of chuckled and joked with us in another answer about they have to, right? And I think that's the kind of obvious reality of this Suns team this season is like we can talk about if Kevin Durant can provide rim protection help for Jusuf Nurkic and Drew Eubanks and whoever, can talk about if Booker's up to the challenge of guarding the Jamal Murray's, John Morant's, Austin Reeves's of the world at the top of the Western Conference. They have to do it. A championship is the expectation. You don't spend this much money, overhaul this team, spend as much time and effort improving your game as these superstars have done and accept anything less than a championship this year. And they have to defend if that's going to happen. That's just what it is. But that hasn't been the case for Bradley Beal. He's played with mediocre to lesser players for multiple seasons now. And yes, Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis were there last year, but the bench was young, the team was not well-rounded, and they underperformed their talent. They did not play defense. They did not play very purposeful offense, in my opinion. That'll all change this year. I've said a lot of this summer that you have to look back to when he was playing with John Wall, maybe year 3, 4 of his career, in order to probably get the closest approximation to what you can expect from Beal this season. And so when you take all of that into consideration and the topsy-turvy nature of his recent history in the league, it's impossible to measure what Bradley Beal is going to be. And I'm excited to watch and learn and understand his game and his evolution and his adjustment, maybe more than anything about this Suns team, starting on Sunday in preseason. All right, let's talk about Jusuf Nurkic and Nassir Little next with Mike Richman of Locked On Blazers. First, today's show brought to you by Ibotta. The holidays are getting closer, which means you might have a long list of gifts you need to buy. Don't just spend money on everyone else without getting anything back in return. Use Ibotta to start getting your own cash right back to you today. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're buying. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $100 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, the game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards to places like Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app now and use the code LOCK to start earning real cash back now. Go to the app or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use the code LOCKED when you register. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store. Promo code LOCKED.
All right, still chatting here. And a Locked On Suns, Locked On Blazers crossover episode. I'm Mike Richman, host of Locked On Blazers. Brendon Kleen, host of Locked On Suns. Make these shows your first listen. Subscribe, do all of that fun stuff wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Brendon, I've been driving the ship curious about DA. I am sure you got questions about Nurk. Hit me with them.
So, I mean, I think the place that I want to start, there are certain incredibly granular analytics that paint Jusuf Nurkic as a credible rim protector, even in the past few years since the leg injury.
Right.
Are those stats telling the truth? Is he capable? If you say our head coach, Frank Vogel, created the Roy Hibbert Frankenstein's monster, can Jusuf Nurkic do his best, mimicry of that and just block shots and stand in the way and play 20 minutes a game in the playoffs? Is that dream reasonable for Suns fans to have?
That specific dream you just painted, stand in the way, play 20 minutes in the playoffs? Hell yeah. The problem with Nurk is the ask beyond that. His issue has mostly been consistency. It's not that he's incapable or unwilling or all of these things. It's just like sometimes the energy and effort wanes and he doesn't have the physical gifts to make up for a night when he is not playing as sharp as he needs to be. Like, you put Nurk in drop, he's big, he knows where to be, he's got good sense. He has really good hands. Like, he has really good hands on both sides of the floor. He'll get in passing lanes and deflect passes and block shots without being a leaper and all those things. And on the other end, he has good hands. And I think that's a pretty big upgrade for the Suns, a guy who can pass out of the high post. But there are nights when he's just not engaged. And even in drop coverage, he gets blown by. And because he doesn't have the physical gifts to make up for it, it's like, oh, he doesn't have it all the way. But yeah. Vogel has proven to be pretty good with this type of player. Not just Roy Hibbert way back when, but like finding the last guy to find really good minutes out of Dwight Howard, right? Dwight was kind of unplayable after he was no longer a Laker. And Dwight Howard is like a Hall of Fame basketball player. It's not the same level as Nurk, but a similar type of player at that stage in his career where it was going to be drop coverage, not drop back, crowd the paint, block shots, rebound, and all those things. I think Nurk can be that. I think there is belief that on defense that Jusuf Nurkic is a stylistic upgrade that helps the Suns get better on that end. And I think it might be easier for him to buy into the just do what you need to do type of thing in a way that maybe it wasn't for DA. Like I think that's likely. I worry that he is enough of a downgrade on offense that the frustrations, the Suns are going to be really good on offense because they've got a bunch of really good players. So there's a way to just totally mitigate Nurk's struggles there. But he is worse on offense in a significant way compared to what Ayton was. And that might be a thing that pops up.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, I think, on the offensive end because at the same time as I think you're right. Like you go to Jusuf Nurkic's, cleaning the glass, has it broken out by all the different spots on the court. How good are they at making shots from there? It's a lot of blue. It's a lot of lower percentile, right? Like he just doesn't put the ball into the basket at a high level from any place on the court. And like that sounds like a really like sick burn about an NBA player, but it's just kind of true. He does other things well. I think the passing, the screening, the rebounding, those are going to be places where he can impact the game that Ayton didn't, I would think, just kind of watching it from afar. But let's on the offensive end, though, I think one thing Suns fans and NBA fans in general have kind of like is this real? Is this not real? Is the 3-point shooting from this past season? Why did he start taking more?
Because he always wanted to, and they finally let him.
That's
it. Even in the last year of the Stotts era, Nurk flirted with shooting threes. The 2020-2021 season. But Terry Stotts was like, you miss a lot of them, and so I don't love that you take them. And it was like, the offense isn't like the Blazers' strength was offense. So like getting a bad shot on offense when you have Damian Lillard, it seems like a mistake, particularly because you're going to be bad on the other end. Like, let's go be the number 1 offense in the league because we might be the number 25 defense in the league on the other side. So like, we need to score to win. We can't, having crappy possessions is not a good plan for us. But Chauncey Billups said, yeah, shoot him, big fella. And Nurk started shooting him. And this past season, for the first time, he started making them. He shot, above the league average, not on a lot of volume, but above the league average. When he has space, it's a long load up. Like, it is not a quick release. It's a long load up if you've watched any of his shots. But it doesn't look like he's forcing them. It doesn't look funky. He's a guy who has that kind of range. He doesn't need to leap because he's a big person. You could space him to the corner and he has comfortable touch there. It's just they never really guarded him. No, teams never committed to the point where they guarded him. So even though it became this, I'm an above average shooter from 3, it never became a geometry impacting weapon on offense. And I think with the Suns, that's the next step for him, right? Is that like, because they're so good and because everyone on their team shoots 19 footers, the greatest 19-footer shooting team ever, but like, you do need around those guys people to kind of get the heck out of the way. And Nurk has the potential to get the heck out of the way and be exactly that. It's just, will teams respect it? Or will teams say, I'm going to go double Devin Booker because I'm really worried about this dude taking mid-range pull-ups. And if he kicks to Nurk in the corner, we're not worried. I'm curious, do you think he's the primary screener on offense just because he has to be and he's like more of a pick and pop guy? Or is he a spacer? Because sometimes, and you know this better than me, the Suns have said, screw pick and rolls. We can ISO and kick from here because we have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. It doesn't matter as much.
And especially this last year with exactly when they got Durant, they, hey, let's just clear out, right? And I think that's the luxury of having the talent that they have. I think he'll do both. I think that they will probably explore their best players screening for each other quite a bit, and especially with Durant having the ability to dribble and shoot at his size, it would be kind of silly not to. A lot of people liked the chemistry that Beal developed with Porzingis. Maybe some of that can be translated into Nurk, who's not quite as mobile, not quite as much of a threat to create for himself, but is big and can shoot, hopefully, like you were saying. So I think that they'll see what they have and what they like with all the combinations of players. I do have some Nassir Little questions, which maybe we can get to briefly. But on Nurkic, how big of a concern is the injury stuff at this point? Like, is it, it's always this thing, or is it he's just getting up there, so different stuff always seems to happen? Is it they were bad, so they let him rest more than he needed to? I think, where on the scale is he with like injury risk, quote unquote?
Yeah, some of it was like Nurk was about to play, not this past season, but the season before. He was about to play 70 games entering free agency, but the Blazers, and I think they might end up getting in trouble for this here in the next couple months, but like they just made up injuries whole cloth and held him out of the games. Like they just said, he has plantar fasciitis, which is something that he did deal with early in the season, but he had played through for 65 games. And then they were like, I just flared up. He's got to sit down so we can draft in the top 5 or whatever. And so like he would have played another 12 games. And for Nurk's trouble, he sits the last 12 or 14 at the end of that season, and they gave him a giant contract. Thank you for your services. So it worked out great for him and Clutch Sports, but he has had little nagging things. Like, he had a catastrophic injury in 2019. He broke his leg. Yeah. But prior to that, he had little things that flare up. He's just a big body. He's a big body, and he seems to have he's had some calf things, some hamstring things, just some like it's hard to run around and be 7 foot, 300 pounds and have your legs always work because maybe bodies shouldn't play basketball as much as they do.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping if he can play even a little less than he did in Portland, that could help. I mean, you never really know.
Yeah.
But
one of the things about Nurk is like, even at his full strength, you're maxing out at about 29, 30 minutes. Like, he's not a 36 minute a night guy. He just doesn't have the stamina because he's gigantic. Like, he's just too big for it. And that's his best skill, is that he's gigantic. Like, I mean that as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's some of the appeal is that he's just bigger than everyone else. And you go into each game being like, well, they don't have someone who can set a screen like him. They don't have someone who can, if he's engaged, keep him off the boards and that type of thing. Like, he's just so big. So I think the injury stuff is real, but I don't think it is. I think it's a little overblown in recent seasons because the Blazers have punted on the final, 2 weeks to a month of the season on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I think Suns fans will be familiar with that, judging from how we had to look at the Beal injury history the past few years as well. But do we want to do Little right now or save it for the next segment?
Let's go to the next segment. Let's talk Little. Let's talk Toumani Camara, if you have a single thought. And then let's answer the question. Did both of these teams get better? Because I think this is a situation where that might be the case. Join us in that third segment, won't ya? I'm still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richman, host of Locked On Blazers. Still chatting here with Brendon Kleen, host of Locked On Suns, in a crossover edition of Locked On Blazers and Locked On Suns. You have questions about Nassir Little. What do you want to know?
Did you watch him the first 4 years of his career and think he would be pretty solid on a great team?
I was convinced heading into last season that he was going to be an NBA starter, and he was not. He was not. I'm a Carolina guy. Like, I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Nassir Little went to UNC. I am perhaps guilty of being a homer, but I will say he was not good his 1 year at UNC. The reason he slipped in the draft is because he was not very good. He went where he should have gone. He has the physical tools to be a really good defensive player. He has not figured out the team concept on defense. Frank Vogel might be the guy who helps him figure that out. There was a time when it looked like he was understanding one-on-one defense. Ball's in front of me. I can use my length. I can use my strength, my athleticism to be a good defender. He slipped in that area last year. There was a time when he was a really good offensive rebounder, but then he started shooting and making threes last year. So he stopped crashing the glass because he was at the three-point line. He just hasn't ever put it together, and he's had so many little weird injuries that his career has just stopped and started and stopped and started. And then when he's had opportunity, he hasn't earned that consistent trust. I think there is an NBA player in Nas, but the Suns would be the first team to find it, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I covered that draft pretty closely too, just being that the Suns had a high pick and ended up having 2 first-round picks and everything else. So I definitely have the perception of him that feel and awareness are some of the things that are holding him back. And just statistically going through some of it, I think it tracks with what you're saying, that there's been seasons where individual skills have jumped out, but there's not been one season where all of them combined to have him be kind of a net positive. So yeah, it seems like it'd be a pretty considerable leap for him to go from what he has been to somebody who's like, in an 8-man rotation in the conference finals or something. That would be a pretty huge leap, but I guess they have him under contract beyond this year, so maybe it's more of a long play.
Yeah, he's on a cheap deal. It's very little risk, right? He makes like $7 million a year for the next 4 seasons. Like that's great if he's an NBA player, and if he's not, it's not that big of a risk, and it's like a pretty tradable contract. Like, it's very low risk. Like he became a pretty good shooter last year. If he can shoot a little bit and Vogel can unlock his defense, that's a dude who can help you in the regular season. And I think increasingly, like for really good teams like the Suns, right? A team that's going to compete for a championship, you need 12 decent players that can help you win enough regular season games to get you where you need to go, because guys are going to miss time and all those things. And then you need 8 dudes who can play in the playoffs. Yep. I think Nas has a chance to be easily part of that first mix, the regular season positive contributors that get you there. And then the Suns will say, here's our 8. You may or may not be part of it. Probably not, as we stand here today. I guess it'll be Keita Bates Diop, but like, who knows? But like, I think there is, because the way the regular season and the playoffs are so different for like elite teams. I think Nas is a decent risk, or like a decent sort of flyer, because like Grayson Allen, it's like, yeah, we can get good regular season minutes, or enough good regular season minutes to get us where we want to go.
Yeah, that tracks.
The Blazers got a player that, frankly, I did not know about until I saw the trade. Can you tell me what you know, if anything, about Toumani Camara? And shout out to all my Belgian fans listening. Big day for Belgium.
Big day for Belgium. Big day for Dayton. Big day for the University of Georgia. Yeah, this guy, I didn't know who he was until all of a sudden, number 52 in June, he gets selected by the team I cover. And I mean, look, I think it was smart of Portland to kind of steal him in this thing, because the Suns clearly, they showed us that they believed in him by giving him one of those, hinky special type of second round picks that are kind of basically an option based on your performance the previous year, but the team has control for 4 seasons. Not super common for unproven second round guys. He is older at 23, and they really built, I wouldn't say it's probably a stretch to say they built their summer league team around him, but they allowed him to have the ball quite a bit in summer league and didn't really block him in any type of way. They put some guards and some bigs, and then he was kind of the facilitator. He got some scoring opportunities. They let him grab and go off of rebounds, and I think he acquitted himself pretty well. He didn't make his threes, but he really impacted the game in summer league, and it's summer league, but I think that considering feel and kind of two-way awareness and versatility and stuff like that is what doesn't always show in summer league. The fact that he did show it for a team that we were evaluating as, can he break into the rotation at some point over that, next 2 or 3 years for a team and be a cheap contract and all that stuff when he was going to be a Sun. I think he was headed in that direction. So I think he very well could end up being an NBA player. I mean, he's one of these guys that kind of cracked a little bit later, blossomed over the course of his college time, and seems to kind of still be on the upswing even though he's older. So it's a perfectly good flyer. He's 6'8", he's toolsy, he's kind of awkward because of the lefty stuff, but also pretty fluid. Not the most crazy explosive athlete, but actually more kind of athletic than you would think when you might first watch him. So yeah, I think, like I said at the beginning of my show, talking through the trade when it happened a few days ago, like I think he's already probably higher in the pecking order than like Keon Johnson would have been, just in terms of that stuff, because he has kind of put it together in a way where you can see how he would impact winning in the NBA, whereas Johnson, not so much. So yeah, I think Suns fans were pretty bummed to lose this guy.
Okay, sold. I'm in. I'm all in. What
as much as it can be for the 52nd overall pick, right? Like, who knows? But
right,
everything was trending okay, I kind of like it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you find an NBA player in the second round, you did a really good job. And if the Blazers traded for a guy in the second round who can play, you did a really good job. I think and you mentioned this, and I think this is a really good point. The Suns basically had to choose a very limited number of people that would join their extremely expensive roster. And if they chose this dude with the 52nd pick and didn't try to send him to the G League or, two-way him, and gave him a real deal, that shows that they thought he deserved to be part of a limited number of options, a limited number of choices there were going to be. So I think that matters. Okay. Let's finish here. Do you think the Suns got better in this trade? Do you think they are better after this trade than they were prior to it?
Yeah, I attempted to answer this question on 2 episodes yesterday, and I'm not sure that I actually gave my audience a definitive answer. I think where I come down is their upside as a team probably increased by a fractional amount. 5, 10, 15%, but part of that is the trade flexibility that they got with this deal, which, isn't very theoretical, but it matters. And just being able to get to a few different types of lineups now, allowing some of their reserve big men to get some run in a way that we didn't expect them to, and just reimagine the team a little bit rather than everything was just really hinging on if DeAndre Ayton could get it together. Now, less so. So I guess there is kind of that upside of like, hey, we could be a different thing, and that just brings with it a little bit of a higher ceiling. But I also think just kind of punting on a position is a crazy thing to do if you're trying to win an NBA championship, and they got a lot less confident, I think, about the floor of their center spot with this deal. So it's hard, but I guess I would say their ceiling got a little higher, their floor got a little lower. I don't know where that leaves you if as far as better or worse.
Yeah, it seems like they got is higher variance, perhaps. And
exactly.
That's, I don't know. Maybe if you're trying to win a championship, a little more variance could be valuable. I think the Blazers got better. I mean, they lost Damian Lillard, so like worse, but obviously like even significantly worse. Like they're gonna win 24 games or something. But like, I think they got, to be clear, I think they got worse. But I do think Ayton has a chance to be better than Nurk because the ask is different in each situation. So I think, like, I like the money. The part where the money is tough for Ayton matters so much more on teams that are trying to be good. For rebuilding teams, Ayton's contract isn't that big of a deal. Like,
no.
The Blazers aren't going to be putting together a team where they're like at the margins and need to make little small moves to help them win in the playoffs. They're just trying to figure out what the next version of the team looks like. And if DeAndre Ayton is part of the next version of the team, great. And if he's way overpaid at the very end, the tail end of this deal, when Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe and whatever need new contracts, they'll deal with it then. But that's years down the line. I think the money part that makes DeAndre Ayton unappealing to, 20 other teams is just like not an impact for the Blazers. So it's literally just about his skill level, and his skill level is pretty high on offense. He's going to make layups. He shoots like 70% of the rim. Blazer fans are going to love it. You're going to love it.
Yeah.
So
great touch.
Yeah. I think he's got, like, obviously the Blazers got worse on purpose, but I think you can kind of see why it matters that they chose this direction. And, once they trade Drew Holiday, then we can decide whether the trade was good or not. And for now, we can just say, whoops, I guess he didn't end up in Miami, and take it from there. You got anything else for me? Should we just let people go and imagine their new centers of the future?
One last thing on Ayton is to your point about making them better. Like, he never got to run here.
Yeah.
And if this team plays fast, which I would think if you have Scoot Henderson as your point guard, you should be doing that. He'll just get 4 more points from that, So I think that's a fun way to imagine kind of the impact he can have too. And they'll be super fun to watch, I think, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's my big thing about this team this year is like they're probably going to be more like enjoyable. They haven't been super enjoyable the last couple seasons. I think the Blazers have a chance to be more enjoyable, and not everyone maybe can enjoy 55 losses, but I will have no problem. I will have no problem finding.
They'll be my 8:30 team over the Lakers and Clippers. I'll tell you that.
There you go. Real League Pass fans know you got to pick a team in every time slot. So get on it for the late crowd, because the Blazers are going to be the entertaining group. Brendon, this was a whole bunch of fun. I hope both of our listeners got what they were looking for. If you are a listener to Locked On Blazers, check out Locked On Suns, covering Nassir Little, covering your boy Drew Eubanks, the Shack of Troutdale, Jusuf Nurkic in the desert, and a whole bunch of fun. And if you're a Suns listener, come on over to the program, because DA's got a new home. Brendon, appreciate the time. Let's do it again soon.
Let's do it.